All right. Welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking to you. First Monday broadcast of the new year, although I was on last week, the last 4 days of last week. Arlen, Happy New Year. Thanks for joining me.
It's my pleasure, Hal. Glad to do it.
Well, it's great to have you on. And I was talking to one of my listeners who I wouldn't say complained, but mentioned that the program might benefit from a little bit of humor. And lo and behold, your latest edition, Life of the Potty, is out. Let's talk about it. Maybe this will put a smile on people's faces. I know that sometimes using the potty will bring a smile to my face, especially if it's been a day or two and I haven't been able to.
There's definitely a lot of humor in this, a lot of potty jokes, a lot of strange things. But that's why I wrote it. I figured I might as well be outrageous and see if there's kids out there who would appreciate, this kind of thing and potty humor and all that. So,
no question. Now, this is the newly revised and republished version. I was not aware that there had been a previous release of Life of the Potty. What was the demand? You could not meet the demand for the original run, and you just had to come out with a new version. Is that what happened here?
I wanted to do something that I can, promote and market. And so I had to make it as good as I could. And so I got somebody to do the cover and somebody to do the illustrations. And so and right now I'm just starting to market it. I'll put some ads in Amazon and we'll see what happens. I don't know if anybody's going to buy it, but I'll let you know next week if they do.
Arlen Grossman, author, is with us. I've called him a pundit. Today he is an author of Life of the Potty. And is this a dream come true for you, Arlen, to have your work, in between the covers of a book, to have your kind of, this kind of, I don't know, what would you call it, a life's work, your magnum opus, if you will?
Well, I've always wanted to have a book with my name as the author, go into a bookstore and see it. And I haven't had that up to now. I've had newspapers, magazines, and all that. But to actually write a book with my name on it, that is kind of a dream. If it works.
All right. I did not put yet the link to Life of the Potty. I may not in my description, mainly because I think that's up to Arlen, and I don't know if he would want me to promote, but maybe I will. But you can get Life of the Potty. Just go to thebigpicturereport.com. That is in the description. That's also on your screen, thebigpicturereport.com, and click on the links there for your version. And you know there's Kindle, so you don't have to get the hard copy, or you can also purchase the hard copy. There is, of course, our good friends in Carmel, and I hope they're still there at Pilgrim's Way. Paul and Cynthia Arlen, they may be interested in promoting Life of the Potty, or at least putting it out there and having you maybe do a book signing.
Let me mention though that the easiest way maybe to buy it would be to go on Amazon and put in the title or put in my name, and you'll get to it, and then you'll see more about the book and how to order it and all that kind of thing.
And again, the link is also at thebigpicturereport.com. So you can just get there either through the description of this video, or alternatively, if you browse to thebigpicturereport.com. Arlen, when I told my wife, Mindy, that you were an author and that your book was out there, she was a little jealous. She expressed some, she said, how come Nancy is so lucky that her husband has a book and you don't? When I told her the actual title, she pulled back a little bit. I think her envy, the edge of her envy was blunted, perhaps. Do you feel are you walking a little taller at home now in front of your wife because you have Life of the Potty out there?
I'm just wondering if the Nobel Prize Committee knows about it and all these, the other book awards, if they know about it. And if they do, then maybe I'll win a major award and people will respect me for what I've done.
Well, let's get into this just a little more. We are going to get to some more serious topics. Not that this isn't serious, but perhaps slightly more serious topics in a moment. Again, this is Halitics. Please click like. Please click subscribe. Bottom right blue and white square that says Halitics. You can become a subscriber if you're not already. There's no charge, just like there's no charge for Life of the Potty in the Kindle edition, which is what I would urge folks to to check out if they want to, read it first. Although certainly, do you think it benefits Arlen from the hard copy? I mean, the imagery and all that.
I think so. And if they go on Amazon, they'll be able to read a sample portion of it, like the first few pages. So you'll get an idea of what it's all about.
Did you, how did you come up with this topic? I mean, I'm curious. Was it a dream come true for you to write Life of the Potty, or was it just sort of, oh, hey, maybe I'll write about potties?
I think I was born to write this book, Hal. Well, no, I wanted to do something totally outrageous, and just seemed to be totally outrageous, and just to see what will happen, and use my humor and imagination, and see what I come up with, and this is what I came up with.
Well, we're having a little fun here with Arlen and his new book, new edition, I should say, Life of the Potty. So how hard is it to do this? I am going to guess it's hard. Even we joke around a little bit, and there's a lot of potty humor in the book, but you can come up with the jokes, the puns. We all can do that. But to actually put it together, I got to believe that was a real challenge, Arlen.
It really was, Hal. It's hard to do, especially these days. It's hard to get a book published, especially the old-fashioned way with a publisher and an agent. They're just not interested unless you're a famous name or have had great success in the past. Otherwise, it's just a crapshoot, and you hope that it'll catch on with people, just reading it and promoting it among their friends and all that. But yeah, it is a tough thing to do, and I had a lot of trouble getting it onto Amazon because of the technical aspects of it. Has to be exactly the right kind of format and all that. I actually had to pay people to do some of the things for me, like the illustrations and the cover and all that. And so I spent some money, but I'm hoping it'll be worth it, and I'm going to spend a little money on marketing too, and I hope that'll pay off.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the illustrator, because it seems like you must have a professional illustrator. Is that correct?
Well, there's a website called Fiverr, in which people they put they have certain skills, and you can click on them and negotiate how much it'll cost to do like illustrations or whatever. And it's pretty popular. There's a lot of things on it, Fiverr, and people, it's a way for people to get freelance work done.
So this illustrator Gohar also obviously gets the credit, right? So therefore this is to their benefit as well, because on their CV, when they're looking for maybe a paid gig of some sort or other opportunities to illustrate, they can cite this credit to their name.
Especially if it's like a bestseller, they could say, I illustrated a bestseller, Life of the Potty.
I can tell you one town where this book is going to go over big is West Commode, Florida, where it's set.
Oh, yeah.
Now, is there such a place? I mean, I get the joke, a commode is a toilet, but is there actually a town called West Commode, Florida?
No, I don't know if you noticed, but the initials are WC.
Okay.
So there's so many different, variations like that, and you got to kind of, think about some of these things.
That's good, Arlen, because I was like, I could fake a laugh, but I'm not good at it. But you made me laugh. That was not faking it. So the WC was excellent. Let's get into just a little bit more commode talk, if you will, from Florida. And yes, I got a lot of the jokes, and I guess this makes it easier, right? I mean, and also I think very accessible. I was going to give you credit for that too, because it seems like this is the kind of topic I think that everyone can relate to.
That's true. All of us pretty much use toilets and potties and things like that. So that much we know. But I'm hoping, some of the jokes in there and some of the, like for instance, I've used UFO, University of Florida at Orlando, and people might pick up on that. And
But that's not a potty joke, is it?
no, it's not. You're right.
Because I wasn't sure about that. So I got the names. I was asking about this too. So the family in the Sharman family, which by the way is spelled a little differently than you kind of a little creativity there, right? A little creative license, changing the name from the C to the S. Peter and John, I certainly get the John. I think I get where the Peter's coming from. But then you have a girlfriend as well, not a girlfriend, but a friend who's a girl, Lydia. And I didn't really see the connection there to the theme of the book, if you will.
Yeah, I was just trying to get a female in there, somebody who's maybe Hispanic, which could add a little bit of diversity. And her last name is Excusado, which obviously is Hispanic sounding and also is translated as toilet in Spanish.
Oh, so she has a Spanish last name that is consistent, obviously, with the rest of the. And so there's a little bit of educational, an educational aspect as well. You're learning Spanish. You learn a little Spanish when you read.
Yeah, that's the reason I did it. I wanted people to, learn from my book. Yeah.
So this is hilarious, Arlen. All kidding aside, it's very, very funny. There's an encounter with all the outhouse. You mentioned the planet Potty, and that's the sworn enemy. But so West Commode, Florida, is actually on the planet Latrinius, not on the planet Earth.
That's no. West Commode is in Florida.
Peter's the exchange student from Podia. Or Latrinius, from Latrinius.
Latrinius, wait. No, Latrinius is where Peter Potty's from. Portapadia is where all the outhouse is from.
Why do we all find this funny? I mean, at whatever ages we may be, I think this cuts across class lines, age lines, gender lines. People find bathroom humor humorous.
Well, I hope so. I mean, that's the intent of this, and I hope that they really will get that, and it'll go. Then other ages might be interested in it. Other than, I have him as Peter Potty's an 8th grade exchange student, so I'm thinking middle school age might be the most, the best place for it. But I'm hoping other, older readers would also enjoy it.
Well, my sons certainly have the emotional age of at most an 8th grader. So in their mid-20s now, I think they would be the perfect target audience for your book there, which of course now is I'm Life of the Potty. Yeah, I just had to go look at the screen, Life of the Potty. And I sort of have a vague recollection of this when it came out several years ago, but I'm really glad you reissued it, Arlen, and I wish you the very best. Please check out Life of the Potty if you're watching this, and click on it and download it, read it, and buy it, because Arlen could use all the sales he can get, basically.
Thank you, Hal. You're very kind to mention and give us so much time.
I was delighted to. I mean, this is a real accomplishment, and something I could never do. I know Mindy was going to write a children's book about a dog, because kids love dogs, and it was really, really hard to do. You do need an illustrator. Did you, in the original version, before we get to our more serious topics, including, of course, the blockage of Trump, or the ostensible blockage of Trump from the ballot this year, what were your plans for illustrations? Do you have a friend, or do you draw a little bit? Do you have a relative who might have done some of the drawings, or were you always planning to go the route you ultimately followed?
Well, actually, I didn't have any illustrations at all in the original version, which didn't help much. There was just the front cover. So I wanted to get, I wanted to improve the book, make it look better. And so I, rewrote it, revised it, made it, I hope, good enough to that people will want to buy it. So time will tell.
Yeah, well, I want to just again commend the illustrator. I think that looks very, very nice there. Although the one thing I would note, it kind of looks like almost like a tooth, right? I mean, I guess it's just the shiny white look. The potty looks a little maybe like a tooth, but I think that's a really nice illustration, actually, Arlen, and it's very captures the eye for sure.
Well, yeah, it is kind of hard to make a toilet that looks like a person, so I think it was about as good as you could possibly do.
Excellent. No, really, really good. I don't want to, I'm very impressed. I mean, I mentioned the tooth. I think it's just because it's the white enamel of one's tooth does remind one of the white porcelain of Peter Potty's toilet face, body setup. But I get it. It's very, very good. Very interesting. Well done. Bravo, Arlen, and good luck.
Thank you, Hal.
All right, let's get to your topics. Now, I say yours because I did ask you, and this was my topic last week. Have you been, you don't really watch my live stream, do you, when you're not
once
on?
in a while, I'll peek in.
I've had to really nag you to do it on occasion. I'm not going to berate you for this, but I'm curious, is it just depressing? What's the because you do have other media sources, certainly Tom Hartman. What do you still follow Stephanie Miller?
Not as much as I used to. The problem is there's just so much out there, Hal. There's just so many things to do and so many things to follow, and it's just hard to do it all. So,
do you find my show? Let's not make it all about me, except right now. Do you find my program? Because this is what I mentioned earlier, actually, and I'll follow up. It's too depressing. My topics are just dark and darker and darkest. And maybe not enough humor as well. Is that something I need to do? I don't know, because I would say Hartman, I've never heard any humor in Tom's program. Stephanie surely is funny. Tom isn't funny, but he still has a good-sized audience. I don't think it's as big as he claims it to be, but we've been over those numbers. Do we need to inject humor into Halitics?
If you can, but when you think about it, the things that are going on in this world politically, all the wars, all these other topics, abortion and everything, they're not fun topics. They are very serious and can be very depressing. And, the probable Republican frontrunner is very depressing, and as we know. And so, there's a lot of that going around, and so you can't help that, but if you can find a way to get some humor in there, that's good too.
Well, I did talk with I say we because with my callers and guests last week, most particularly Charlie Cooper from Get Money Out Maryland. I do commend, that was an excellent, if I say so myself, I thought Charlie was a great guest this past Tuesday, so 6 days ago. And we really did a deep dive into the 14.3 Amendment 14, Section 3 cases to bar Trump. There's been mixed response. The Secretary of State of Maine has blocked Trump from the ballot, although that's been appealed to the Supreme Court of Maine. The Supreme Court of Colorado blocked Trump, but it stayed enforcement of that decision. And then Michigan went the other direction and kept him on the ballot. And I think there may have been a decision from, is it California? I'm not sure. Some other states as well. So here's Jamel Bowie weighing in from the New York Times. And tell us what your reaction was. I don't want to put you on the spot, Arlen, but you did mention this to me. So I want to give you pride of place to discuss what you found interesting or compelling about what Bowie wrote a few days ago in the paper of record, the New York Times.
Yeah, I like him. He's a good writer. And what he wrote about was exactly the way I feel. I think it's very clear to me and a lot of other people that is pretty much spelled out in Amendment 14, that somebody like Trump, who actually did lead an insurrection, should be disqualified based on that. And I think it's pretty clear. I mean, there are people who, will say otherwise, of course, and maybe the Supreme Court will chime in there, and it's hard to believe that they would, go against Trump, but it'll be they're in a particularly tough position. I think the Supreme Court, they don't want to look too pro-Trump because so many of them were appointed by Trump. So, it's a tough one. It'll be very interesting to see how they rule on that, if they do.
Well, here's kind of the bottom line, and this is not, he doesn't provide citation, and he makes some assertions which may or may not be open to dispute, but Bowie argues Trump sought and actively tried to subvert constitutional government and overturn the results of the election. And I don't think that's untrue. I think that's probably accurate. I'm not clear the threat of brute force. Certainly there was threats. I mean, they did occupy the Capitol, his mob, if you want to call them that. I guess the question I would ask you, Arlen, is do you feel comfortable allowing a court or a Secretary of State to make the decision that whatever Trump did do is sufficient to keep him off the ballot without any conviction for this particular, for an offense that either meets the definition or is close to it? Because he hasn't been convicted yet. Are you comfortable letting courts bar people without an actual criminal conviction?
There's nothing that is said about a conviction on that particular amendment. And we're, if you read the amendment just as it is, I think it fits the bill of somebody who should be disqualified. That's pretty clear, I think. And, the Supreme Court always talks about how they follow the original, thinking on this, and but so if they actually veer away from the actual writing, the actual literal interpretation of that amendment, then they can't really say that they're originalists. So
well, you're right. I mean, we talked about this with Cooper. I talked about this with Cooper. There's no question that the amendment, the Constitution is silent as to what processes do somebody who is alleged to have been an insurrectionist or to have given aid and comfort to insurrectionists. It's not, we don't know the decision. It has never been ruled on definitively. And it does not require, clearly by its terms, any kind of criminal conviction. But you do run into this problem that you have a candidate who is supported by somewhere between, I'd say, 40 to 45% of the electorate, somewhere in that range. Certainly not half of the country will vote for Donald Trump, but probably 50% won't support Biden either. So you have a candidate who is clearly one of the probably the top two most popular and also most unpopular in the country. Do we really feel comfortable? This is my question to you. Do you really, because I'll answer my question before I give it to you. I am very uncomfortable saying to almost half the country, you cannot have your choice on the ballot.
Well, do we follow the Constitution or do we not? And I think it's pretty clear that what the Constitution says, the rule is he should not be running. Of course, the entire Constitution can be interpreted a lot of ways. It's not precise on a lot of matters. And, like the Second Amendment, gun control, all that could be interpreted different ways. So,
let me put this spin on it, or not spin, but you just use the exact words that I put on the screen there, that Bowie, these are Bowie's words, not mine. Is removing a would-be authoritarian from the ballot itself undemocratic?
I don't think so. Not if it's clearly spelled out, like I say, in the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. We do follow, everybody swears to follow the Constitution when they get sworn in, and there it is, right in black and blue print, saying exactly what should be happening. And I think, what Trump did qualifies for insurrection.
All right. Well, there it is. I'm not as confident as you on this, Arlen. I'm not saying you're wrong, because this is one of those very close knife's edge calls for me. But on balance, I lean heavily towards letting the voters decide. Well, and so I believe this is a case where they can make that decision. But said, let me just said, I do lean very heavily in that direction. That said, I think the case it's not nothing. It's not make weight. What Trump's behavior on January 6th and perhaps more importantly in the weeks leading up to January 6th was terrifying. It was clearly undemocratic. I mean, in the worst way. He was pushing to be a tyrant. Now, I don't think he's the worst president of all time. We've gone over that many times. I think that Democrats make a boogeyman of him so they can avoid reckoning with their own awful behaviors. But that said, that doesn't excuse Trump. I mean, I can see both sides of it. That said, I don't feel good telling American people you can't vote for this guy just because, because arguably, not with certitude. Yeah. I mean, would you agree with this? The Supreme Court needs to make that decision in the end.
I'm not even sure about that. There's so much that's not spelled out about what the Supreme Court is supposed to do. Our Constitution is really kind of loose in a lot of ways and not real precise on a lot of matters. And, that's a problem with the Constitution.
But isn't the Constitution, but then let me make this point. If that's the case, then don't we absolutely need the Supreme Court to make the decision so that there can be at least some degree of credibility to it, legitimacy, to legitimate it one way or the other? It is, after all, it is based on the U.S. Constitution, which the Supreme Court is tasked with making the final interpretation.
And they often don't do it very well, if I may say that. But obviously, it eventually will go, I think, to the Supreme Court. They're going to have to make that final decision, and it'd be interesting to see what they decide. There's just a lot of ramifications to what they decide to do. So.
I want to show you, if I can, let me see, maybe I can't. I'm having a lot of trouble with this. We got a comment from Sheldon Laskin, an attorney, and I want to see if I can get this on the screen, Arlen, because and I was really pleased, frankly, Sheldon. Thank you so much for commenting on this, because I think it's very instructive, and also I love hearing from new people. You may have commented before, but I don't remember seeing your commentary here. So let's see if we can get Sheldon. I thought this was really interesting, Arlen. And I'm an attorney just like he is, so maybe that's why. But let's see. There we go. So Sheldon writes, as an attorney, I believe the Supreme Court will rule that only Congress can establish the procedure to disqualify or DQ an individual like Trump from holding office. And then he goes on. Let's see if we can get the rest of that on the screen there. I don't personally agree with that reading, but it's not unreasonable. The court will not want to be responsible for keeping the voters from choosing the president. I think that's correct. I mean, I think that we don't know that will happen. It's certainly plausible that this will play out the way Sheldon writes.
Well, like I say, literally, the 14th Amendment does say what should happen, and I think you have to follow that. Literally, like we do everything else in the Constitution is supposed to be done, and ultimately the Supreme Court often has to decide what exactly it does say in the Constitution and whether it should be followed. But this one, I think, is spelled out pretty clearly. I think Trump qualifies for being taken off the ballot. And by the way, I also want to mention how you were questioning whether Trump's the worst president ever. And I don't think it's even close. I think he is by far the worst.
Well, I'm sort of surprised to hear you say this, Arlen, because we dedicated an entire program to this. And I thought at the end of that program, you kind of recognized that you had overstated the arguments against Trump. And I'm now find that I was completely unable to persuade you, despite this voluminous slide deck that I put together with, arrows and all sorts of visual aids, and yet it got me nowhere, apparently.
Well, he keeps saying things worse and worse as time goes on. I mean, his latest thing was, the Civil War probably, he could have negotiated it. Lincoln should have negotiated it. It's like he's saying, well, slavery, not so bad. We could have worked something out.
Well, that's what Nikki Haley made an absolutely ugly statement about slavery. I didn't hear Trump make one, but maybe he did. Arlen, let me just ask you this. What's his Abu Ghraib? What's his Cambodia? What's his General Pinochet? Who's his General Pinochet? Who's his Kissinger? Where's his Trail of Tears? Because I just look at who you kill. And the numbers of people that Trump killed aren't anywhere close to those other people. The number of people that Trump tortured isn't close to those. I don't know how he's even in the conversation with the people like George W. Bush, H.W. Bush, W. Bush, and Nixon and Andrew Jackson. They're not even close in my book.
Well, let me ask you this. All the things that Trump has said, all the horrible things he's said, any other candidate that we've ever had would have been disqualified from being on the ballot. Nobody
Arlen, that's not, I don't agree with that either. I mean, people say all sorts of crazy, not silly things. I can't agree with you there. I mean, Ronald Reagan dropped the top marginal tax rate from 70% to 28%. I mean, I hate Trump's tax cuts, but his tax cuts weren't as bad as that. I mean, I don't know where, I look at actions. Deeds are more important than words in the end. So I'll go back to my question. Yes, Trump has said Trump is a real loose cannon and he's a wild card and his language is ridiculously bad. But what's his Abu Ghraib? What's his Trail of Tears? What's his Cambodia, Arlen?
Well, I'll tell you what I think it is what he's done to the country as far as the Republican Party.
Who's dead? Where are the millions of dead in his wake?
You're right. Literally, they're not there. But I'm just saying what he's done to the country is he's pretty much got rid of the Republican Party. It's all turned into a Trump cult now, and they'll defend anything he does, which is ridiculous.
But what he does is no worse than what they used to do in the past, which is torture people and start wars under false pretenses. And there are other Republicans. There's Ron DeSantis and there's Nikki Haley, who denies that slavery was the cause of the Civil War. I don't think those Republicans are really qualitatively worse than Trump.
Has Trump ever done anything for ordinary people?
Yes. His tariffs were good for steel workers. And yes, getting us out of Afghanistan was good for the U.S. military, enlisted soldiers. So, yes, those are positive things that he did. Yeah, I hear my phone ringing. We're going to get John on in just a sec. I got John ringing. I love the way that worked. Arlen, final word on this, because I don't want to spend the whole program on it. We're never going to agree. I think I made what I consider to be very strong arguments. They don't persuade you. I know you think your arguments are strong. I frankly don't even get them, to be honest with you.
Well, think of all the horrible things he said about soldiers, about John McCain.
How does that make him the worst president? Who's dead? Well, I'm not saying he didn't kill people. He did bad things. Who's dead, though, Arlen? Well, he didn't turn Iraq. He didn't turn Libya into a terrorist training zone the way Barack Obama did. Don't you think, seriously, with all due respect, don't you think what Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama did to Libya is worse than than when Trump called W a loser?
Well, also you got to keep in consideration the fact that he's brought back hate and prejudice.
Well, did he bring them back, or did they ever go away? But you're not answering my question. I've been answering your question. How does whatever you just said compare? And I would say the worst thing he ever did, the worst thing I find, well, the insurrection's bad. That's very, very bad. But putting that aside for now, I feel the treatment of the immigrants at the border is the worst thing, to separate families. That's cruel. But how does so that's just inhumane. But the other actions that you've raised, how do those compare with what Obama and Hillary Clinton did to Libya?
Like I say, I think the way he's changed the country, the way he's a threat to democracy, the way he's been talking, and that's a real danger. If he were in charge, he would pretty much, I think, kill off democracy. It'll be really tough for the Democrats to get reelected or elected with the kind of rules that he would set up. And There's a lot of things.
Look, this is what people do. They try to win elections. But I'm not defending Trump. I think Trump is really bad. I just look at what some of these other people have done, and I just say what Trump did isn't as bad. By the way, John, we lost you. I hope it was on your end. I don't mean to be funny, like, oh, it's your fault, but I hope you were through. I know sometimes you have phone issues. If you call back, we'll try to get you on. Let's move on, Arlen, because we're not going to get there. I think you made your case as powerfully as you can, and I've obviously made my case, I believe, as powerfully as I can. So I want to show you this comment here. Let's see. Why am I not seeing it? Okay, I've got to change my deck here. I know people love hearing all the.
It wouldn't be Halitics without some technical problem.
I just want to get, I want to get you on, but I also want to show this if I possibly can. So there's that. And then I want to get here's why I'm having trouble with this. I was looking in the wrong place. So Arlen, this is from Shade, and Shade makes a suggestion because we're all about making this program as good as we possibly can. Improvement. Just like your home, you want to make your home improved. We want to make this program better. Hal, would you be interested in trying to get Peter B on your show on a weekly basis? And later on, he pulls back and says, well, I doubt he would ever come on a weekly basis, but maybe once or twice. So I'm curious, what do you think about that possibility? Arlen?
Well, I haven't heard Peter B in so many years. I really don't know what to say about him. But I mean, it's certainly something that to be explored, other people that could come on a regular basis like I do. But Peter B, I don't know that much about,
Well, and I mean, one issue I have with Peter B, and I made this point, is I don't know that he would add a different dimension. I don't know if you remember his program, Arlen, but he and I are pretty similar in views. I don't think there'd be much disagreement. I think you need some edginess, right? You and I don't share. We have some relatively different, decidedly different views on some issues. Peter B and I were pretty much eye to eye.
That's hard to believe.
You think that's hard to believe?
You're just all by yourself with your views. I thought
pretty much.
But Peter B, I don't know. I'll have to look back and see the kind of things he said and did before I could make a judgment.
All right. Let's go. By the way, again, click like, click subscribe. A little bit all over the place. Hope you're enjoying this first 2024 episode with Arlen as he's drinking from his cup. He's got his, what does that say? Paddle heads on it? What does that thing on your head say?
Yeah, when I went to Montana for a wedding a while back, earlier in the year, we went to a minor league baseball game in, I think it was Missoula.
In Missoula, yeah.
Yeah, and they have a team that they call the Paddleheads, which is about mooses, or I don't know what the plural.
Oh, there's moose are paddleheads. Moose love water. Do you know that? You knew that, right? They love the water. They swim around, and they live up in the North Woods. I would think it's cold, but they must have they're so hairy, I guess it keeps them warm. But
I don't know much about, they don't have them in Vermont, and they don't have them here in California where I live. So I don't know much about them, but they are kind of a funny looking creature, and paddleheads, I think, is amusing.
They're the largest of the deer family. The moose are, I think, part of the deer family, and they're the largest deer. So they're very big, and they're dangerous too. People, say, oh, you got to worry about whatever mountain lions, which you do. And obviously grizzlies are very dangerous, but the moose are dangerous because they have those antlers, and they will charge you if they feel like you're, encroaching on their turf, or they're young. They're not going to eat you like a grizzly. They're not going to, I don't know that grizzlies eat you either, but they're not carnivores, but they're not carnivorous, but they will charge.
That's what I like about your show, House. The fact that you learn about moose, you wouldn't get that on other shows. So there's a lot of interesting things you could learn from Halitics.
I try. I do. It's like a Shakespeare play. There's a little bit for everybody. Let's move to educate. Well, I was going to talk about the SAT, but I want to ask you this, Arlen, because I spent an awful lot of time the first week discussing the Harvard president, the ex-Harvard president. Now she's not the president anymore, Claudine Gay. Do you have any kind of broad strokes thoughts on her ouster, departure, resignation, whatever term you want to use?
It's a tough one. How the whole issue of all those presidents going before Congress, presidents of the universities going before Congress and having to explain how they feel about anti-Semitism and how it would be handled at their college. And it's just very confusing and hard to really know what to say, because students are entitled to their opinion, but when they get to the point where they're calling for genocide or something, then you have to step in and say that's not right, and make a severe enough penalty. But it's just a lot of crazy stuff going on about that. Students.
Well, it seems like, without getting into the whys and wherefores of that particular aspect of the story, which I don't feel that Claudine Gay was particularly insensitive or has a record of showing any insensitivity towards the concerns of the Jewish students or the Zionist students at Harvard. That was not the reason she was ultimately let go. It's because of the plagiarism allegations, some of which were, at least according to the Harvard Crimson, clearly accurate, correct, and which she tacitly acknowledged, at least by once they had been come out, she rewrote some of her theses. She edited her work, decades after the fact. So I think that was the bigger factor in the dismissal.
Yeah, and you had different university presidents dealt with differently, and some were able to keep their job, and some were not of those major universities. The whole thing in the Middle East with Gaza and everything is just kind of messed up everybody's head, and nobody really. There's just so many different viewpoints on this. You have your viewpoint about, and I kind of agree with you. What Israel is doing as far as their retaliation is overkill, and but at the same time, if you have students that are saying that everything that anti-Semitism is. I know they were saying the pro Hamas, and we know that Hamas certainly has nothing good that you could say about them. So a lot of people don't really understand what they're saying, and but I will agree with you. I think Israel is making a lot of mistakes, and Netanyahu is a horrible leader, and we can get into that if you want.
No, I really just sort of want an update. We can talk about Israel, Palestine, I focus on that all the time. Unless you want to go further, otherwise I will talk briefly. We've got about 20 minutes left. By the way, call in 240-242-5646. Click like, click subscribe. Seen a little bit of a tick up in the number of subscribers. I had declared as a goal, Arlen, 1,000 subscribers by the end of 2023. Nowhere near there. Very disappointing for me. But let's hope 2024. Fingers crossed. 2024 is my year in terms of Halitics blowing up. We get to 1,000. I always say this: if we get to 1,000, Google will start sending me money. So that will make me very, very happy. Of course, if you're a regular viewer, you won't be so happy, because then you'll have to watch those commercials, because they insert them in the videos. It's sort of annoying. I always skip ahead, but you can't completely avoid seeing the progressive ads. And I think there's who am I always seeing? That guy Ryan Reynolds. He's got some new. He's a movie star. He's got some new cellular phone company he put together. So you see these ads over and over, and it's very frustrating, very annoying to me. But that's what you'll get stuck with. So maybe you don't want to subscribe, because if I get too many subscribers, you're going to start seeing those ads. But my answer is suck it up and do it anyway. Arlen, go ahead.
Yeah, that's another thing that I think about a lot, and the fact that we're so overly advertised. Everything is all about promotion, and more and more you have more commercials on TV, more and more things interrupting your internet websites, and I think it's just gone. It's been
awful.
really crazy in so many different areas of our life.
You're so right about that. I don't even watch football anymore, to be perfectly honest with you. I almost never watch it because there's more commercial. The amount of time they're actually playing is dwarfed by the amount of commercials. And even during the actual live action, you will see little blurbs and things on the bottom of your screen. It's very frustrating. Do you want to comment on football? So you're a 49ers fan. The 49ers, you got to be a little worried about the way they ended their season. The blowout loss to the Ravens, who look like odds-on favorites to make it to the Super Bowl, and then they lost again yesterday to the Rams. So you got to. I assume you're a little nervous, Arlen, a little bit worried here about that.
No. Of course, yesterday's game didn't really matter for the 49ers. They've already got it clinched, and so they're not putting all their best players in there and trying to going all out to win yesterday. But obviously they've lost a few games and they are vulnerable, and there's no great team out there that's winning every single game. So it'll be very competitive, though there are some very good teams, Dallas, Philadelphia, Baltimore. So, it'll be, I think, a very good playoff and, leading up to the Super Bowl.
Well, both of my sons are very good at, those, what do you call them? Like the fantasy leagues and all that. And they both are very good. And when I say good, they make money doing it. I'm amazed at how they manage to pick these teams, but they've had quite a bit of success. And my younger son said he's picking now he's a 49ers fan. He's a San Francisco Giants and 49ers fan because we lived out in Carmel and he remembers those days. But he's picking the 49ers to win the Super Bowl. And I asked him about the loss to the Ravens. He said, well, there were, it wasn't as bad as it looked. Some of the interceptions were picked. He said they'll learn from that. And he thinks all their talent is greater than Baltimore's. I think that's a fair assessment. I don't say he's wrong. Is that what you're kind of banking on as well, Arlen?
Well, I think they're both very competitive. I think, some days the 49ers would beat the Ravens and other days the Ravens would beat the 49ers because they both have a lot of, good players, a lot of talent, good coaching. Sometimes football just comes around to just the funny bounces and penalties, and you just don't know.
100%. And that's why, I never gamble. Like I told you, my kids seem to put a few extra shekels in their pockets from their fantasy league. I would never do that, even though sometimes I pick them right, but it's just too, it's like you said, the football bounces funnily and no one can predict into whose hands it's gonna bounce sometimes. So I'm not gonna play that game and let the casinos get their vig off of me. All right, I wanted to talk about this. This is really interesting. We talk a lot about higher education. I don't know if you thought about this. Now, Arlen, when kids apply, and I don't think this was the case when your son, when Jeffrey was applying to Cal, and it may not be the same at Cal anyway. A lot of schools don't even require you to submit a test result, either ACT or SAT. And I think that's new. When I say new, the past week, especially since COVID. So some of these elite schools, it may even be the Ivy League. I don't know. I haven't looked into all the numbers, but I know a lot of them, you don't even have to submit a standardized test. Have you thought about that? And if you have, or you haven't, do you have any immediate reaction?
Well, the article that you sent me was very interesting and it had some good evidence that, we really should reinstitute more standardized testing in SATs because they seem to be, according to what I was reading, more predictable of success than, like just high school grades and things like that. So, I guess it makes sense to have some kind of standardized testing.
Well, I think so. I think the problem with just going with high school grades, there's many of them, but let's go through those real quickly. One, there's such variation between schools. So you compare a GPA of 3.8 at one high school and the same GPA at another, and the level of achievement required to achieve that 3.8 may be vastly different at one school versus another. So you can't say students who get the same grades at different high schools are equivalent. That's one issue in terms of their learning and their aptitude or their achievement. So that's one issue. Then also grades are subjective. They're not completely subjective by any means, but they are to a degree. And then you have your grinds and your teacher's pets. and they're going to necessarily figure out ways, or they may get better grades than other kids who may learn just as much from a class. Now, I'm not saying grades aren't important. I think grades are more important than SATs. But I think if you don't use the SAT as a leveling stick, so you can say, okay, here's a 3.8 and here's a 3.8. So these are both kids who got mostly A's, some B's. They're not perfect, they're not 4.0, but they're good. They're very solid. But one's got, combined SATs in the 1400s, another 1200s. I think we can make a fair assessment that the one in the 1400s probably learned more in high school or has a higher aptitude. And that means something. That means, as you said from this article, it makes a difference. You can see from what I put up on the screen here, a little relationship between high school GPA and success in college. So GPA doesn't predict success in college as much as test scores. Again, I think you need to use the two of them in conjunction. I do not like this movement away from the tests for that reason, among others. One other reason, Arlen, I have a problem with it. A lot of what the schools do look at can often be gamed by parents, whether it's, it's hard for me to, participating in sports. People think you watch football, you watch basketball, you see a lot of African Americans playing those sports, and you think, well, okay, this is a leveler. But for so many sports, it's just the opposite. Sports like tennis, hockey, even soccer, kids going to soccer camp, baseball camp, you got to buy the equipment. The more affluent kids have an advantage being able to make it to sports teams. Same with playing an instrument. If your parents can afford to send you to piano lessons or buy you a harp or what have you, you have an advantage. If you have the time where you can devote to extracurricular activities versus having to go home and help take care of your younger siblings, or working once you hit 15 or 16 at a job after school. Those are all ways that I think kids who are from poorer backgrounds are disadvantaged without perhaps the leveling factor of SATs. And one more point here, and then I want your response. The final point, and I think it's very fair, is that yes, we do know that kids from wealthier backgrounds and kids who are white and Asian do better on SATs. And we can argue that that's a reason. Some will argue that that's a reason to disregard them. But I think the better response is that if we're looking for diversity in on our college campuses, use the SAT scores or the test scores to make decisions between students who are roughly in the same pool. So maybe when you're comparing lower income students or kids who go to very, schools that serve a lower income community, then you can make a decision among two kids, one who has higher SAT scores, even if that student's SAT scores aren't as good as those from the kids who go to the top schools. Or you're choosing among African Americans, again, from maybe a working class background. Again, you can make a pretty good guess how well they will do at your school if you look at their SAT scores. You can't do that if they don't have to submit them.
Yeah, and it's interesting too that you didn't mention legacy, which is one of the I think the worst abuses that parents who have kids who've gone there before and they've given money and all that, they have an advantage over poorer families who don't have that advantage. So that's one thing, and there's just so many factors. I don't know if there is a certain something that they look at to decide who should be in a college or not. I mean, there's just so many different factors. Your extracurricular activities, your like you say, your grades. There's just so many factors. I don't know if there is one way to do it, but I suppose I hope there's been some research on these issues, and your article does say that the standardized tests do predict a little bit better than other things. So, yeah, it's not easy. I mean, who's going to say what one person is better than another as far as getting into a university?
Well, and I think that's the biggest issue. And we put on colleges the burden of engineering society, addressing wealth and income inequalities, bringing in students from poor backgrounds and the like. And to me, that's not what the purpose of an institution should be. It should be to educate people who have demonstrated the ability to achieve at a high level. I think the question of how we make a fair society, a just society, should be done with tax and spending policies where we tax the rich at very high levels so they don't get that rich. And we make sure that everyone who's not wealthy, who comes from poor backgrounds or has guaranteed health care, guaranteed, everything, education, everything you need to live a decent life, and including a job, because I don't think we should be simply giving money to people. We should be making sure that they have opportunity and access to meaningful, remunerative employment that they can succeed at.
Yeah, absolutely. The money is a big factor. I mean, how much, some families just can't afford to go to college and others can. And you have to, weigh those kind of factors.
Well, we should make college affordable for all, I think. I think that should.
Oh, sure.
No one should be kept, should have to make a decision not to go to college who can succeed in college because they can't afford it. We have to change that. And also, we have people who are permanently in debt because of college loans, which is just awful. Arlen, we've got John. I think we got you, John. Are you there?
Yeah. Good morning.
Hey, man. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Hey, I was just wondering, you were talking about, all these different presidents' death tolls. Can we even count Trump's yet? I mean, his actions, it may take years before these deaths start manifesting, but what about rolling back the Iran nuclear deal? That's potentially very dangerous. We may, not know for decades. What about changing the standard deduction and making it so high that nobody itemizes anymore and therefore doesn't really give anything to charity? They just, they either, throw stuff out or just give it away to, other people, which is, I guess, charitable. But, what about some sort of impending civil war that could happen here? Just an increase of violence and hate crimes. I mean, how do we calculate Trump's death toll?
And not only that, John, there's also the issue of climate change. He took us out of the treaty, the international treaty about that, and did a lot of damage, I think, over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so, and I don't.
Again, I'm not defending Trump, but look, again, we're burning more oil and gas now. We're producing more oil and gas now under Biden than we did under Trump. And while I agree with you, a lot of what Trump did is terrible. Calculating those kinds of potential deaths down the road is clearly speculative, and you can make those same cases with every president. I would argue there's nothing Trump's done that you can put on the same level as Abu Ghraib, that you can put on the same level as bombing Cambodia, turning Libya into a terrorist training zone, starting a war with Iraq that led to 1 million dead and so many displaced. He just isn't in that realm. I mean, he's done really bad things.
What about,
he's just not in that realm. If you want to say it doesn't matter, those aren't as bad, fine, but we'll just have to agree to disagree then.
Well, what about if he takes office and he cuts Ukraine off and all those Ukrainians now pour into Europe because they don't want to?
Well, we don't have an obligation to. We created the Ukraine crisis. It's to a large degree we provoked Russia into attacking Ukraine, and we prolonged that war for 2 years. John, I know Arlen disagrees. Final word from you, John. I'm going to let you go because we're at the hour. It's not like I'm trying to cut people off. I got 1 hour. We're at the hour. Go ahead.
Final word. Okay, final word is all of those satellite states were not coerced into NATO. They chose to join NATO because they knew Russia was a threat. And so so Ukraine made some choices of its own free will And we also, the nuclear powers on the Security Council guaranteed Ukraine's security if they gave up nuclear weapons in the 90s. They gave up the weapons, and here we are. You don't want to guarantee their security. And
all right, that's great, John. Thanks. That's very interesting, very informative. Go ahead, Arlen. Follow up. Pile on me like after John.
There's no question that, Putin's the one responsible for this war. Is Putin that went in and invaded Ukraine. Ukraine didn't invade Russia. So, and he's, and Putin's just such a horrible leader and such a horrible
I think your phone is ringing, Arlen.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's our clock. Just ignore it.
So I'll just mute him for a minute. I'll let Arlen get final word just to keep the clock out of this. Hundreds of thousands are now dead, I believe, in the Ukraine war. We have done everything we can to keep it going rather than to stop it. And the same with Gaza, Israel, not hundreds of thousands, but 23,000 dead Gazans killed by Israel. So, you want to point fingers at presidents for death tolls, which is what I do when I'm trying to figure out who the worst is. I think Joe Biden's got a lot of corpses he's got to answer for. All right, Arlen, final word from you. I'm going to play the exit music when you're done, or when I decide you're done. No, when you're done, within reason. And I'll see you next week, by the way.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that the biggest problem with Trump is he's poisoned our political atmosphere. He's made it so much so that we're just on, against each other, and separated the country, in half between red and blue, and that's gonna hurt.
Arlen, thanks so much. Great to have you on, and I look forward to speaking with you next week. And I look forward to speaking to all of you out there in YouTube land tomorrow.